That deep scar running across Gerwyn Price's forehead is the one viewers see every time he walks onto a darts stage, and it isn't from rugby. It came from a single punch outside a South Wales pub in 2010 that left him with a brain haemorrhage, 42 stitches in his forehead, and nerve damage to an eyebrow. 12 years later, the same man signed his name to a boxing match against a former professional fighter, and what happened in the weeks that followed is one of the strangest stories in modern darts. To understand how a man with that injury history ended up about to lace up gloves in a Caerphilly village pub, you have to go back to the beginning and not just to the night that gave him the scar. Born on the 7th of March 1985 in Markham, a small village in Caerphilly, Price was already drinking in places he had no business being by the age of 17. Speaking in the ETV4 documentary Against the Odds, broadcast in November 2021, he laid out the first incident in his own words. His exact words: "I had this scar from when I was out in Blackwood. I was only 17. I wasn't supposed to be out drinking or anything. I can remember speaking to a boy at the bar. Then out of the blue, for no reason, he pushes a pint glass in my face. That was the first attack, and as bad as it sounds, the second one nearly killed him." Sunday, the 25th of April, 2010, Price was outside the Plasnovid pub in Bargoed, 25 years old, and playing Premiership rugby for Neath. Following an argument, a 23-year-old man named Owen Body floored him with a single punch, and the medical damage that followed was catastrophic. Price suffered a brain haemorrhage, took 42 stitches to close the wound on his forehead, needed another 5 stitches in a chin wound, and ended up with nerve damage to an eyebrow. The case landed at Cardiff Crown Court, prosecuted by John Prober. Owen Body, of West Street in Bargoed, pleaded guilty to inflicting grievous bodily harm and left court with a 12-month prison sentence. The Western Mail covered the case under the headline, "Man jailed for attack on top rugby player." That scar on Price's forehead, the one viewers see every time he walks on at Alexandra Palace, comes from the pavement outside that pub. At the time, Price wasn't a darts player at all. He was a professional rugby union hooker, capped at Wales under-19 and Wales under-21, and he had toured Argentina with the Wales U21 alongside Jamie Roberts, who would later collect 94 senior caps for Wales and 3 for the British and Irish Lions. Roberts spoke about him on the same ITV4 documentary, putting it like this: "I remember him being just determined, a very tough player. He would run into brick walls. He'll have an understanding of what is required to be at his best, physically and mentally, to play darts." Most of Price's club career belonged to Neath RFC, with 2 stints at Cross Keys filling in the gaps. During the second of those spells, he scored one of the most memorable tries of his rugby career. On the 7th of May 2012, Cross Keys beat Pontypridd 32-19 in the Swalet Cup final at the Millennium Stadium, and the match report from an early bath described his try this way: "Hooker Gerwyn Price scored the pick of the Keys tries, showing the Ponty defence a clean pair of heels to sprint over in the corner from 30 metres to spark wild celebrations on the Keys bench. Glasgow Warriors signed him on a short-term loan in February 2013 to plug an injury gap, and the loan was over by March of the same year." According to Opta data cited by the Scotsman, in 2 games for Glasgow, he landed 8 of his 10 line-out throws and made 9 out of 9 tackles, and both Warriors games were won. Welsh rugby legend Mark Ring offered this assessment to the Scotsman in January 2021. "In my view, he could have been right up there with Ken Owens, and that's saying something because I really rate Ken, probably as the best hooker in the Northern Hemisphere. Technically, Gezi was brilliant. He threw the ball into a line-out on a sixpence, he was a really good scrummager, and his work in the loose was outstanding. He had pace to burn." January 2014 was when Price collected his PDC tour card at Q School after beating Roby John Rodriguez 5-3 in the decider, then carried on with one final year of rugby for Neath, before quitting the sport altogether later that year. As he put it to Golf News in January 2017, "I got my tour card in 2014 and still played rugby with Neath for another year until I decided to knock it on the head. I was getting paid to play darts and had to make a decision as darts was proving a better income, so I stuck with darts." What Price brought from rugby into darts was a physicality and an aggression no other top-level player matched, and that aggression, more than anything else, is what would later make a boxing match feel like the obvious next step. To grasp why, you have to look at the controversies that built his reputation. The defining moment arrived at the 2018 Grand Slam of Darts in Wolverhampton. Quarter-final, 16th of November, Price beat Simon Whitlock 16-15 in a contest heated enough that referee Russ Bray had to caution him on stage. 2 nights later, on the 18th, Price beat Gary Anderson 16-13 in the final, with 2 physical flashpoints lighting up the match. Anderson pushed him, no handshake followed at the end, and as Price became the first man to lift the new Eric Bristow trophy, the crowd booed the trophy presentation. Sky Sports pundit Wayne Mardle, commentating live, put it bluntly: "It was brewing. It got beyond a darts match. It got ridiculous in the end. You shouldn't be touching other players. You shouldn't be backing in, pushing. Gerwyn Price pushes the buttons of other players, that is a fact." The Darts Regulation Authority moved next. On the 23rd of January 2019, they hit Price with a fine totaling £21,500, broken down as £8,000 for the Whitlock quarter-final, £12,000 for the Anderson final, and another £1,500 for inappropriate social media posts directed at Anderson. He also picked up a 3-month playing ban, suspended for 6 months, and that total stood as the largest fine in darts history. The DRA described his behaviour as a cynical attempt to put off his opponents to gain him an advantage. Gary Anderson took only a formal warning. Price appealed, and on the 5th of August 2019, the appeals committee halved the match-related fines and brought his total down to £11,500, though the suspended ban stayed in place. On the Darts Show podcast, soon after the original sanction, Price gave his view. "I was shocked at what had happened. Not only that I had a fine, but that Gary Anderson had absolutely nothing." 2 years on, the 3rd of January 2021, Price and Anderson met again, and this time the stage was the PDC World Championship final at Alexandra Palace. Price won 7 sets to 3, averaging just over 100, hitting 13 maximums and pocketing £500,000 in prize money. He became the first Welsh PDC World Champion and the new world number 1, and once again there was no handshake at the end. By February 2022, Price had a PDC World Championship to his name, 3 Grand Slam titles, and a reputation as the most polarizing figure in his sport, and that's when he announced he was going to box. 16th of February 2022, the news went up on his Instagram story. The charity boxing match would take place on the 9th of April 2022 at the Valley Tavern in Fleur-de-Lys, a village in Caerphilly close to where he had grown up. His opponent was Rhys Evans, a former Welsh professional boxer from Blackwood, with a pro record of 3 wins and no defeats, though Evans hadn't fought professionally in over 7 years. 3 charities would benefit from the night, namely Cancer Research Wales, St David's Hospice Care, and the Velindre Cancer Centre in Cardiff. The motivation was personal, and Price spelled it out on Twitter the same day. "I will be taking part in a charity boxing match to raise funds for 3 chosen charities, one very close to my heart. St David's Hospice cared for my mother-in-law for a short while with her battle with cancer. They were incredible. Let's raise as much as possible." He also confirmed he needed to drop 10 kilograms for the fight, and from that point the training started, the date was locked in, and tickets went on sale. What changed everything was March 2022. After the Kazoo UK Open, Price returned to hospital to investigate lingering pain in his throwing hand, and the X-ray revealed a small fracture. On the 30th of March 2022, the PDC put out a statement in Price's own words. "I was still in discomfort with my hand, so I went back to the hospital and the X-ray showed a small fracture. The usual course of action would be to be put in plaster for 4 weeks, but with the Premier League and other events, that's not something I wanted. I'll be wearing the splint now, other than when I'm playing darts, and making sure that I rest the hand enough when I'm not to allow it to heal properly." The charity fight slid back from the 9th of April to the 13th of May 2022. Michael Van Gerwen, asked about the situation by the Daily Star, was skeptical from the off. "I don't think boxing is good for your body. I think you can get injured. I think it's not the best decision to make in your life, but Gerwyn is Gerwyn. He always does things differently, so that's his own thing. I don't think he's going to do the fight now with his hand. I'd be surprised." Van Gerwen called it correctly. Late April 2022, roughly 3 weeks out from the rescheduled bout, Gerwyn Price withdrew from the fight altogether, and the reason he gave was simple, reported in the Mirror. "I've pulled out of boxing now. On medical advice, I've been advised not to do it." The medical advice was the whole story. 12 years earlier, this same man had been left on the pavement outside a pub in Bargoed with a brain hemorrhage and 42 stitches in his forehead, and now his throwing hand, the single most valuable part of his anatomy, was already fractured. Climbing into a ring against a former professional with a 3-0 record was never a fight any sensible doctor was going to sign off on. That's how the box fight that was announced never happened. No bell rang at the Valley Tavern. The training stopped, the weight cut became irrelevant, and one of the strangest subplots in modern darts history quietly dropped off the calendar. The cancellation did nothing to soften Price's persona. If anything, it confirmed it. 1st of January 2023, Price walked on stage at Alexandra Palace for his World Championship quarter-final against Gabriel Clemens of Germany, and for the 5th set he turned up wearing industrial ear defenders to shut out the hostile crowd. He switched to earplugs for the 6th, mouthed the words "I can't hear you" at the audience after winning the first leg of the 5th, and lost the match 5 sets to 1 as Clemens averaged just under 100. Following the defeat, Price suggested he might never play at the World Championship again. Van Gerwen weighed in on the ear defenders, telling Euronews, "I don't think I would use them. It's never been done in darts before. He doesn't need them, but he's been going through a tough period and he doesn't need to put himself in that situation." 2.5 years later, on the 21st of July 2025, Price beat Daryl Gurney 10-7 in the first round of the World Match Play in Blackpool, and the match ended in yet another flashpoint. Gurney had mimicked Price's trademark roaring celebration during play, so Price kept calm on stage, finished 81 on double 12, and offered Gurney an aggressive handshake at the end. According to Sky Sports commentator Mark Webster, only 3 words came out of Price's mouth: "Well played, buddy." Security stepped in backstage to keep Gurney away from him, and the PDC barred reporters from asking about the incident afterwards. One more boxing footnote rounds the story out. February 2025, ahead of a Premier League night in Glasgow, TalkSport Darts sat down with Price and asked him about Jake Paul, and the answer was anything but diplomatic. He is a YouTuber. He's not a fighter, is he? I think it would just be one punch and it would be all over. Out cold. He'd probably beat Canelo, but he's not beating me. He'll never beat me in Wales. Nobody beats me in Wales. Jake Paul saw the clip and replied by direct message, which Price showed on camera the following month, with Paul writing, "Come to Greece, man, just name a price." Price's reaction was less swaggering, telling the cameras, "I was a bit scared. Nah, I need to get some training in." No promoter ever picked it up. No contract was ever signed, and the closest Gerwyn Price has come to a real boxing match remains that cancelled charity fight in May 2022 at a village pub in Caerphilly. The story of Gerwyn Price's box fight that never happened is, in the end, the story of a man whose reputation has always run bigger than the violence he's ever actually delivered. He was glassed at 17 in Blackwood, punched into a brain haemorrhage at 25 in Chisier, Bargoed, and fined a record sum by his sport's governing body for aggression on stage. He's been booed, mimicked, pushed, and confronted by his opponents across countless stages. He's worn ear defenders to drown out an entire arena, and he's traded direct messages with one of the most famous boxers on the planet. Yet when he was 3 weeks away from finally throwing a punch in a sanctioned ring for charity in his home county, a doctor told him no, and he listened. That is the story of when Gerwyn Price almost had a box fight.